Hello and a warm welcome to the lesson, the platform manifested e-learning. Today we continue with the subject governance and compliance audit. The topic is peer review mechanism. We are continuing with the chapter. Today we are going to analyze the peer review mechanisms, stages. And candidates, the peer review mechanism for governance and compliance audits typically involves a structured, multi-stage process to ensure thoroughness, objectivity, and adherence to professional standards. And while specific terminology and detailed steps might vary slightly depending on the administering body or the oversight body like the Institute of Internal Auditors or the AICPA, while they may slightly be different, the core stages are generally consistent. Like we have the first stage, which is planning and engagement. Planning and engagement is always the first stage regardless of the oversight body's standards. And just to remind you candidates, peer review, we had defined it as the objective, independent, and systematic evaluation of an audit firm's quality control system and its adherence to professional standards and ethical guidelines. Auditing firms are required to conduct their audit engagements in accordance with professional standards and certain regulations or regulatory framework. So there are times when the auditors are also subject to review by independent parties. We are calling the reviewers, peer reviewers. And peer reviewers are like the auditors of the auditor, auditing the auditors. It is briefly defined as auditing the auditors. So in this lesson, we discuss the stages, beginning with planning and engagement. Planning and engagement is the first stage. We are discussing stages in peer review mechanism. 1, planning. Let me say stage 1. Stage 1. The first stage is planning and engagement. Engagement and planning. Planning and engagement is the first stage, which may involve selection and appointment of reviewer. Selection of the reviewer. That's the first thing that happens. The firm or the internal audit function that is undergoing review, or the reviewed entity. The reviewed entity is the firm that is being reviewed, engages a qualified and independent reviewer or review team, and this selection might be from an approved list provided by the administering body. For internal audit functions, this often involves contracting with an external audit firm or an experienced internal auditor from a different and related organization. So it could just be an internal auditor from another organization or an independent external auditor. So it begins with selection and appointment of a reviewer. So the reviewed firm or entity formally engages and appoints a reviewer. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is the initial communication and agreement. Initial and agreement. These parties must agree before the commencement. And here an engagement letter or memorandum of understanding is signed, formalizing the peer review. And this document outlines the scope and the objectives of the engagement or the review engagement or the engagement review. It also documents, this agreement documents the scope, the period to be covered by the review. It could be for the last 3 years of engagement, or it could be the last 1 year. So it depends. So they agree on the period. Then there is also agreement on the applicable professional standards. Which standards will be applied in carrying out the peer review? Is it the Institute of Internal Auditor standards, or which standards will be applied? There is also responsibilities of both the reviewer and the reviewed entity. The engagement must specify clearly the objectives of both parties, which candidates we discussed in our previous session. The responsibilities of the parties involved in peer review. We discussed some of the general objectives. That has to be part of this agreement. Responsibilities. There could also be the timeline and fees. The agreement must also be in relation to the fees. How much will the review firm pay the reviewer? There is also the kickoff meeting or the inception meeting, which may be held to introduce the teams, to discuss expectations, and also to clarify responsibilities and roles. That should be part of the agreement. That's the initial communication. After the reviewer is appointed, there ought to be an initial communication and agreement, which we explained in detail. Okay? Do you understand, candidates? We are discussing the peer review mechanism stages. Then the third stage is pre-review. We have a pre-review stage, pre-review information gathering. Pre-review information before the fieldwork. The reviewer or the reviewed entity typically completes a comprehensive questionnaire provided by the reviewer or by the administering entity. And this questionnaire covers information about the firm's functions or structure and also personnel, its quality control policies and procedures. There are also questions on listing of all governance and compliance audit engagements performed during the review period. It may also cover information on training, independence, confirmations, and also other relevant quality control documentation. The reviewed entity also provides this information to the reviewer for pre-fieldwork analysis. Pre-fieldwork analysis. Before the reviewer gets into the field, before the reviewer initially commences the review, that information must be provided. What we are calling pre-review information gathering, where the firm that is being reviewed provides information to the peer reviewer. That's step number 3, pre-review information gathering. Then we have planning, reviewers planning, reviewers fourth stage, reviewers planning. Now, based on the questionnaire and the initial discussions, the peer reviewer develops a detailed plan for the review, and this includes identifying key risk areas within the reviewed entity's quality control system. It may also include determining the sample of the governance and compliance audit engagements to be selected for detailed review, and so on. And here, the reviewer may conduct what we call planning interviews. Okay? Planning interviews. What does that mean? That means planning interviews with the key personnel of the reviewed entity, and also developing a timeline for fieldwork. Developing a timeline for the fieldwork is what comes out of the reviewer's planning stage. Okay? That's stage number 1. Then stage number 2, we have what we call fieldwork. Stage 2, fieldwork. That's the second stage. Because after being engaged and there is a engagement agreement, the reviewer gathers information from the firm that is being reviewed. Then planning is done. Then the next obvious stage is go to the fieldwork. And fieldwork may be on-site or remote review, or it could be done remotely. Remote review. The peer review team conducts its examination, which can be either on-site at the reviewed entity's premises or performed remotely through secure data exchange. And this is the core evidence gathering phase. Fieldwork is the core evidence gathering phase. That's the first thing to do when it comes to fieldwork, is to determine whether the review will be conducted on site or be carried out remotely. Then there is review control system. Review of quality control system, and this is not just system but documentation, because every system has documentation. So the reviewer carries out review of quality control system documentation. The reviewer examines the documented policies and procedures related to all elements of quality control, for example, leadership, ethics, client acceptance, human resource, engagement performance, monitoring, and so on. Then the reviewer assesses whether these policies are suitably designed to achieve compliance with professional standards. That's what is done under fieldwork. That is the second thing, is to review the quality control system documentation. Go through the documents. Then engagement file reviews. There is number 3, engagement file reviews. What does that mean? Now, for the selected governance and compliance audit engagements, because candidates fieldwork, at the point of fieldwork, at the point of planning, the reviewer takes a sample of the audit engagements that is going to review, the engagements that were done, the governance and compliance engagements that are carried out previously by the review entity. So a sample is taken. The auditor may select, say, 5 governance and compliance audit engagements. 5. Then he takes the files for the 5 audit engagements. The selected governance and compliance audit engagements. The reviewer performs detailed walkthroughs and substantive reviews of the audit documentation. And that involves assessing adherence to the firm's own quality control policies, evaluating compliance with professional audit standards. It also may include determining if the audit conclusions and reports are appropriately supported by the work performed. It may include assessing the clarity, accuracy, and completeness of the governance and compliance audit reports that are issued. Engagement file reviews. You select several governance and audit engagements that were conducted by the reviewed entity, then go through the engagement files. Identify all the areas of the engagement, audit engagements, and so on. Engagement file reviews. Number 4, interviews. Candidates, we are discussing the peer review mechanism stages. Stage 1 is planning and engagement. Stage 2 is fieldwork. Stage 3, engagement file reviews. Stage 4, we have interviews. The peer review team conducts interviews with cross-section of personnel, including the management responsible for the managers or for the audit practice. It could be the audit director or the partner in charge. We may have engagement leaders and managers, the staff auditors, the staff auditors, and even personnel responsible for HR, for training and independence. Here we are talking about the personnel of the audit firm because we are reviewing the work that is done by the auditor. So interviews are conducted with the staff of the audit firm. You understand? And these interviews aim to confirm understanding of policies, to assess practical application, and gather insights into the firm's culture of quality, the audit firm's culture of quality. We may also mention observation. This is a stage in peer review mechanism. In some cases, the interviewer or the reviewer might observe certain processes or meetings to gain a deep understanding of operational aspects relevant to quality control. That is step number 2. Then you have stage 3. Stage 3. The third stage is reporting and communication of findings. Reporting and communication of findings. Number 1. Stage 3 is reporting and communication of findings. Reporting and communication of findings is the third stage, which involves drafting findings and recommendations. 1. Drafting findings and recommendations. That's the first thing to do at the third stage. As work progresses, the reviewer identifies areas of non-compliance or non-conformance with the professional standards or weaknesses in the quality control systems, and these findings are documented along with the supporting evidence. Then recommendation is made for improvement. Recommendations are done what? For improvement are developed. That's the first thing you do at the reporting and communication stage. Then there is exit conference. The second thing, you have what we call exit conference or discussion of preliminary findings. Preliminary findings. Now at the reporting stage, first of all, the reviewer drafts findings and recommendations. Then after that happens, as the peer review team here candidates holds an exit conference or meeting with the reviewed entity management to discuss preliminary findings and recommendations. This is a discussion with the firm that is being reviewed. The reviewer conducts a meeting, a discussion to discuss the preliminary findings, because after drafting the findings, then these findings are discussed in a meeting with the management of the firm that is being reviewed. And this is a critical stage for the reviewed entity to understand the findings. the reviewed entity may also provide additional context or information that might clarify the issues. At this stage, they also agree, the two agree or disagree with the findings. And then they discuss the feasibility or recommendations. And these discussions helps ensure accuracy and completeness of the final report. It also avoids surprises. Before drafting the final report, the initial findings are discussed with the management of the entity that is being reviewed. Then we may have management response. Management responses. The responses from management, what we may call corrective action plan. Here, candidates, the reviewed entity is typically required to provide a written response to the peer review findings, outlining their agreement or disagreement, and importantly, detailing corrective action plan. Okay? With specific steps and timelines for addressing identified deficiencies. So I want to see the chronology, candidates, at the reporting and communication of findings. After the fieldwork, because here the reviewer gathers evidence. After conducting the review of the quality control system, after carrying out review of various engagement files, after holding meetings with the entity that is being reviewed, after observing processes, the peer reviewer gathers enough evidence, which evidence in the third stage, the reviewer drafts the findings and recommendations. Then they hold a conference or a meeting where these findings are discussed openly, with the reviewed entity also providing additional information. Now, the reviewer may have identified deficiencies in the quality control system or even weaknesses in failure to adhere to professional standards or ethical guidelines for auditors. If that's the case, then the management is required to make responses, to respond. The management is required to come up with a corrective action plan. The reviewed entity is typically required to provide a written response to the peer review findings, outlining agreement or disagreement, and also detailing corrective action plan with specific steps and specific timelines for addressing any identified deficiencies by the reviewer. You understand? Then, of course, the next obvious stage, number 4, is preparation of peer review report. Preparation of peer review report is the 4th stage. Is the next thing to do. Preparation of peer review report. The peer reviewer prepares the formal peer review report, which generally includes the scope and period of the review. The report also includes description of the methodology used. It must also have a conclusion or opinion on the design and operating effectiveness of the quality control system, and also detailed findings, observations, and recommendations, together with the reviewed entity's responses and correction plan. The report is then typically assigned what we call rating. It could be a pass, or a pass with deficiencies, or fail for system reviews, and so on. So preparation of peer review report. I've explained what should be contained in the report. I repeat, this report includes the scope and number 1 is the scope and period of review. Number 2, description of methodology used. Number 3 is the conclusion or opinion on the design and operating effectiveness of the quality control system. And then you have the detailed findings. And lastly, the reviewed entity's response correction plan. Step number 3, stage 3. Then stage 4, let me have stage 4 here. Stage 4. Now the 4th stage is the review and acceptance of or by administrative entity. Review and acceptance by administrative entity. Now the completed review report along with the reviewed entity's response is submitted to the relevant administrative entity, and this could be an oversight body. The administrative entity could be an oversight body. And here, the body, which could be a professional accounting body or the Institute of Internal Auditors Quality Control Assurance Services, may perform an independent review of the peer review report and even reviewing the supporting documentation to ensure that the review was conducted in accordance with the peer review standards, to ensure also that the findings are adequately reported and that the conclusions are appropriate. They also check if the corrective action plan is reasonable and sufficient. After that happens, this oversight body may communicate with both the reviewer and the reviewed entity for clarification. That is the 4th stage. So the first thing to do here is to make submission. Is submission to the administering entity or oversight body. Submission to the oversight body. Submission of the peer review report is made to the oversight body. The completed peer review report, along with the reviewed entity's response, is submitted to the relevant administering entity. It could be the internal audit control assurance services and so on. Then after the peer review report is submitted to this oversight body, the oversight body then carries out what we call oversight review. Oversight. So candidates, I want you to understand that the entity that is being reviewed is the audit firm. It's the audit firm or the governance and compliance audit firm. So you have the governance and compliance audit firm is reviewed. Okay, the work that is done by this audit compliance firm is reviewed by an independent reviewer, peer reviewer. The peer reviewer, we said, selects a sample, okay, of engagements that were conducted by this audit firm. It may be 5 audit engagements, or 10 or whatever number, because the governance and compliance audit firm carries out governance and audit of different entities. There could be many in a year, but the peer reviewer may select a sample which the firm systematically and independently evaluates. Okay? The peer reviewer evaluates and determines if the firm has adhered to professional standards, to ethical standards, and also to check if the quality control system is in order. Okay? So the peer reviewer, at the end of the audit or at the end of the review, this peer reviewer has to prepare a peer review report. This peer review report is then submitted to an oversight body. That means that this peer reviewer, the work of the peer reviewer is again reviewed by an oversight body, because the report is submitted to the oversight body or the administrative entity, which reviews the peer review report. So the administrative entity reviews, okay, that peer review report, because this body may set up a review committee, or the staff of this body may perform an independent review of the peer review report. So the peer review report is subjected to, again, review. And the purpose is to check if the review was conducted in accordance with the peer review standards. When conducting review, this peer reviewer is required to conduct these reviews in accordance with the peer review standards. So the oversight body here, the oversight body reviews to determine whether the peer reviewer conducted the review of the governance and compliance audit firms in accordance, to check if it was conducted in accordance with the peer review standards. You understand? The oversight body also conducts this review to determine if the findings are adequately supported. Because in preparing the peer review report, the reviewer has to ensure that he has sufficient evidence to support the findings. The reviewer, furthermore, the oversight body, furthermore, carries out this review, okay, to check if the conclusions are appropriate and if the corrective action plan is reasonable and sufficient. Because you recall here that the management has to make responses. At the third stage, you recall, we did mention that after conducting the peer review, the reviewer drafts initial findings, okay, which are shared with the entity in a conference. And the reviewed entity is required to make responses, and the responses may include coming up with a corrective action to correct any deficiencies that may have been identified by the you understand? So the oversight or the administrative body checks if the conclusions are appropriate, if the corrective action is reasonable and also sufficient. Then this body, again, the administrative body, may communicate with both the peer reviewer and the reviewed entity for clarification. You understand? So we have oversight, review, then there is acceptance of report. After oversight review, there is acceptance report. What does that mean? Now, if satisfied, the oversight body formally accepts the peer review report and also the corrective action plan. So the corrective action plan is part of the report. The plan, don't forget, is developed by the firm that is being reviewed in response to the findings that are discussed or submitted to the firm by the reviewer. So there is acceptance of report by the oversight body. So the reviewed entity receives formal notification of the acceptance and its peer review rating. So that's the process, candidates, up to this stage. But we have the last stage in peer review mechanism. Here is remediation and follow-up. Stage 5 and follow-up. Remediation and follow-up. This is the stage of implementing the corrective action. Implementation, number 1 is implementation. That is number 1. The reviewed entity implements the agreed upon corrective actions to address the deficiencies identified during the peer review, and this is crucial for realizing the benefits of the review. Because candidates, if the corrective action is not implemented, then there was no point of carrying out the review in the first place. So the firm that is being reviewed has to implement the corrective action plan. Corrective action plan is implemented. That's the first thing that happens. Then there is the follow-up by the oversight body. Follow-up, oversight body. After the action plan is implemented by the reviewed entity, then the oversight body has to make follow-up, because for significant deficiencies or fail ratings, the administrative entity will often require documented evidence of remediation, or they may conduct a follow-up review to ensure that the corrective action plan or actions have been effectively implemented. And failure to implement or to remediate deficiencies can lead to sanctions or loss of good standing with the professional body. Good standing with the professional body, because auditors, candidates must adhere to professional standards. They are required to adhere to the guidelines, to the regulatory framework. And therefore, if the governance and compliance audit firm does not remediate the failings, then that may lead to sanctions or even loss of good standing with the professional body. And that's all for peer review mechanism stages. There are 5 key stages. We've discussed the 5 key stages, beginning with stage 1, planning and engagement. This is peer review mechanism stages. Stage 1 is planning and engagement, where the reviewer is selected and appointed by the firm that is being reviewed. This is the governance and compliance firm. The governance and compliance firm, the governance and compliance audit firm is the firm that is being reviewed by an independent reviewer. So this firm must, first of all, the audit firm must select and appoint a reviewer. That's the first thing to do. Then after appointing this reviewer, there has to be an initial communication and agreement. There will be an engagement letter where the two agree on the scope, the objectives, the responsibilities of each party, the standards, and everything that pertains to the engagement. Then we also have a pre-review information gathering. The reviewer here gathers information from the client. He will come up with a questionnaire where the client is supposed to fill in so that the reviewer can get information about the entity that is being reviewed. Then step number 4, under planning, is coming up with a plan. The reviewer develops a plan. Step 2 is to go to the field. Having develop the plan, then the obvious step is to go to the fieldwork, and the reviewer should decide whether it's going to carry out this review on site or remotely. On site means visiting the reviewed audit premises and carrying out these assessments. Do you understand? There is also the review of quality control system documentation. Now this is where the reviewer begins to get evidence, to gather evidence. Then there is engagement of file reviews. Okay. The here candidate means that the reviewer selects a sample of the previous audit engagements, samples them, then reviews the files. May carry out interviews and observation. That is stage number 2. Stage number 3 is reporting and communication, which involves drafting findings and recommendations. We have exit conference or discussions of preliminary findings. Then the management is required to make responses or to develop a corrective action plan, because the purpose of carrying out this, review is to identify any deficiencies in the quality control system. If there are deficiencies that are identified, the management is called upon to develop a corrective action plan, which is part of the responses. Then, after which the peer review report is prepared. Then, having the peer review report being prepared, this report in stage number 4 is submitted to the oversight body or the administrative entity, which carries out again review. All right. The basis of this review is the peer review report. Then there is the acceptance report at the end of the oversight review. Then in step number 5 is remediation and follow-up, which involves implementation of corrective plan that was developed by management in the 3rd stage. Then of course there is follow-up by the oversight body. Follow-up to check if any significant deficiencies are rectified. So this is a systematic approach to peer review, which provides a mechanism for external quality assurance, which drives continuous improvement in governance and compliance audit profession. And that's all for our today's lesson on peer review mechanism stages. There are 5 stages. Thank you for attending this lesson. Bye-bye.